activated, then it can only mean danger, and I mean fatal.
I am the god of all Daleks. TARDIS detected. Exterminate.
You can't!
Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new Doctor Who video, where today I want to discuss the topic of finales in Doctor Who, because I feel like across the whole history of the show, and particularly in New Who, the kind of importance, significance, the role almost of the finale has kind of changed quite a lot, and so I kind of want to just explore what I think a Doctor Who finale should be, what it has to be, the importance of it, how it affects sort of a fan opinion of the series. I think there's just so many interesting aspects to really what makes a great Doctor Who finale, and also why it really is quite so important.
Doctor Who, tomorrow at 7 on BBC One.
So of course in the new series we've had 12 full series of Doctor Who, so 12 big season finales. I guess you could kind of say season 6 and series 6 and 7 had extra ones by having the split series, and maybe you could call The End of Time a bit of a finale as well, because that kind of saw off the specials year, but I guess it's also kind of more of a special than a finale because it's not the same kind of level of weekly build up to that point. And so I wanted to kind of start off by also just kind of covering off the classic series and looking at that from a finale point of view, because I think it's fair to say that in pretty much the whole of classic Doctor Who, the finales of each season of the classic series very rarely were like the conclusion of a building storyline. It occasionally happened. You can look at maybe, say, season 12, where Revenge of the Cybermen kind of sort of brought to a conclusion the whole Nerva Beacon arc that was kind of a mini arc of the series. Obviously, as I spoke about in a video recently, the Key to Time season, so the Armageddon Factor, as much as being its own story, also brought to conclusion the Key to Time storyline, and the Ultimate Foe in the Trial of Time Lord season 23, that of course brought that storyline to a close as well. But in general, if you look at sort of across the majority of the season, you think, I don't know, season 7, Inferno, the Demons of season 8, Seeds of Doom of season 13, the Talons of Weng-Chiang of season 14, across almost the majority of the seasons of Classic Who, the finale is kind of just another story. Often they might have put a little bit more money aside for it, or they ran out of money by the time we get to it, say the Invasion of Time, but it wasn't really kind of something that they felt needed to be a big, exciting adventure, a sort of big concluding adventure that sort of brought a load of narrative storylines together or anything like that. And to a large extent that was down to the nature of television back in the day. There just wasn't the same clamour from the audience for that big epic finale that would, you know, really be something you're kind of looking forward to in the weeks leading up to it. That wasn't really a thing back in those days in terms of television, and certainly not for a show like Doctor Who. And that's not really that's not really something that was brought into play until the show was brought back in 2005 with the first new series.
Ever since I was a child, I looked into the vortex. That's when it chose me. The drumming, the call to war. Can't you hear it?
The Doctor Who season finale, Saturday at 7:05 on BBC One.
And I think it's fair to say that by the point of 2005, television has shifted quite a lot, and the audience television had kind of changed in quite a large way, that it needed to have a much bigger, more exciting conclusion to a series. It needed to have a linking narrative of some description that ran throughout the series to kind of keep the audience connected and engaged, and so on and so forth. I mean, the classic series was kind of helped by having multi-part stories all the time, so kind of you had a reason to keep coming back because you're watching a 4-part or a 6-part story or something like that, whereas the new series doesn't have that same aspect as much. Instead, it kind of focuses more on continuing plot lines, the developing character relationships, that's much more focused in the new series than the classic series, and of course story arcs of varying degrees depending on the series. We looked at series 1 and it was Bad Wolf, which was a story arc but also was very much just, you know, kind of a word or a phrase that was dotted here and there, before kind of in episode 11 it gets a little bit more focus in Boomtown. Kind of the Doctor and Rose kind of acknowledge, oh, we've been hearing Bad Wolf a lot, by the way, and the Doctor's like, nah, it's nothing, before we then get to the big concluding finale where that's all explained and understood and, you know, becomes quite a big significant thing.
The ending approaches. People and planets and stars will become dust. And the dust will become atoms, and the atoms will become nothing. This is my ultimate victory. The destruction of reality itself.
And so I do think we can trace right back to Series 1 in terms of the very much important role of a finale. Of course, the finale to Series 1 was also the finale for Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, so there was kind of that extra aspect added into it. But the finale, unlike anything in Classic Who, really was so much heavily focused on this Bad Wolf narrative that had been hinted at throughout the series. That then becomes the major plot point of the series. You have the big epic story, a big two-parter that really has a sense of scale to it. You've got the whole the Daleks back in full, you've got the Emperor Dalek, it just adds a real sense of scale to the series, and it's a sort of the big exciting conclusion that the audience are looking for. Whereas in other episodes, you know, you're just happy to enjoy a bit of a, you know, monster of the week type episode. Kind of by this point in terms of a television audience, the expectation is that this finale is big things are going to happen, characters are going to die or going to leave, or there's just going to be a really big story to it that just wasn't the case back in the classic series.
Andorica.
That's a fairy tale.
If it is real, it's here and it's opening. Your world has visitors.
Daleks, Doctor.
Santana, Slovene, Chelonian, Nestine, Dravi, and cyber ships.
What are you? What could you possibly be?
Doctor Who, the series finale, begins.
And I think in general with the television landscape, the kind of importance of the finale has only really increased since 2005, and when we saw the first finale of Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways. And I'm not just focusing purely on Doctor Who here, but I'm talking about television in general. I think that television has shifted in a significant way towards the binge-watching sort of attitude of an audience nowadays, where, you know, Netflix shows are dropped 10 episodes in one go and people binge them all in a day and that's it. And that doesn't lessen the importance of the finale, I don't think. I think in some ways it heightens that importance, because that's kind of, when you've watched it all in such short order, that's the last thing you're going to remember of it, is the finale. And almost because you've watched it all so quickly, you're going to remember a bit less some of the mid-series episodes, and it's all about that finale, that conclusion, that shock character death, or something along those lines. That I think has become heightened in importance because of that sort of binge watch attitude to television that we have nowadays. Conversely, of course, that reduces the importance of cliffhangers in many ways in a lot of TV nowadays, because you don't need to kind of give the audience a hook to come back a week later. They just got to, you know, click next episode and it's playing. It doesn't. That's a lot lesser important. And in some ways, it's where a show like Doctor Who is kind of out on its own. Not out on its own, but compared to a lot of television that is nowadays being released in binge format, Doctor Who is still very much sticking to the weekly format, and I, from a personal perspective, really hope that it stays that way as long as possible. I think Doctor Who works so much better and so much more exciting for us as fans, at the very least, being able to watch it weekly, having the cliffhangers, the big two-part stories that, you know, you've got a big epic cliffhanger at the end of it. Like, just even looking back to like Series 12, for example, like the Master being revealed at the end of episode 1 of Spyfall in Series 12. If we had, you know, just pressed next episode and then revealed the rest of the story, it wouldn't have been as exciting, for me at least, if compared to having to wait a few days to really find out where the story's going to lead us next. What's this new Master going to be like? Just exploring all those aspects I don't think is as exciting for certainly a fan, if you just be able to press the next episode. So, and it's a little bit of a side point of what we're talking about, which is mainly finales, but I think the importance of, I really hope that Doctor Who gets to continue to be a weekly format show, because I think that's where it works at its best. It's worked like that for 57 years. as much as the TV landscape is always shifting and changing, I don't think that Doctor Who necessarily needs to change in that way.
Saturday.
Before I go, I'd like to know why I have to die. Silence will fall when the question is asked. All the times I've heard those words, I never realized it was my silence, my death. It's time.
Doctor Who, all new.
So bringing it back to finales, I think Doctor Who is a show where finales kind of have only ever really increased in importance throughout the 15 odd years of New Who now. I think sort of the scale of finales has often increased. The importance of sort of concluding a lot of narrative points all in 1 or 2 episodes at the end of the series has increased. And you even look sort of from a promotional point of view to the point that we saw in Series 12. Something that I kind of disagreed with was that for episodes 6, 7 and 8, Praxius, Can You Hear Me, and The Haunting Villa Diodati, the online promotion and the trailers shared on social media always started with the tagline, "It's 3 weeks until the finale," and then showed clips from the episode, and then it's 2 weeks until the finale and clips from the episode. It felt like you were so significantly diminishing the importance of the weekly episodes and putting all focus on just the finale is the only thing that's important. The finale is the only thing that really matters. Sure, Praxis might be quite good, or you could enjoy Can You Hear Me, but don't forget the finale, the big Cybermen 2-part finale. That's what you want to wait for. That's what you want to see. And so it's almost like the promotion and the social media side of things for the show, they've kind of decided that what the audience wants is a big finale. The important thing is the finale. We're going to give them that. We're going to shove that down their throats. That's what they want. And I think that's just a sign of at least where the BBC and the promotion teams sort of see the show at, that there are some good Monster of the Week episodes mid-series, but really what the audience are waiting for is that big, exciting finale.
Doctor has a secret, you know.
What is your name?
And it is discovered.
I'm Clara Oswald. I was born to save the Doctor.
There is one place you must never, ever find yourself.
Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Doctor Who, the series finale, on BBC One and BBC One HD.
One of the other interesting aspects of this, I think, is that ever increasingly the finale to a series of Doctor Who is so critical in kind of determining what a fan thinks of a series. I think that maybe certainly in Classic Who days, of course, you'd kind of just judge each story as it was and kind of go from there. And even earlier in New Who, I think you would judge the series as a whole a little bit more. But I feel like in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, the fan perception of the quality of the series is so much down to their perception and opinion on the finale. You look at a series like Series 12 and you cannot have a conversation with somebody about Series 12 without talking about The Timeless Children and their kind of opinion and perspective on that. And ultimately, if you like that idea and that storyline and that episode, then generally you're pretty positive about the series. But if you don't like that, then that completely colours the whole series, even though in many ways the rest of the series has very little reference to The Timeless Children. I know there's Fugitive of the Jadoon, but as a whole, most of those stories don't really have that much relevance to the narrative and don't really explore that, and kind of they don't spoil the episode if you really dislike that kind of explanation and reveal. So I feel like it's kind of just almost unfairly colouring people's opinions of a whole series based on one episode. As I said, that happened with The Timeless Children. I think that strongly happened with Hellbent as well in Series 9. Of course, a lot of it is to do with how much is wrapped up in that story. You think about, the Hellbent, for example, it concludes the whole Clara storyline that we've been waiting 3 years to kind of end, that we thought had kind of finished and Face the Raven, and then she's brought back. And yes, that's a whole other debate for another video, the controversy around that and whether that was a good idea or not. But it's fair to say that, again, people, if they're talking about Series 9, they will always talk about Hellbent. They will either go, oh, Series 9 is kind of okay, but I hated Hellbent and that ruined the series for me. Or, wow, I love Hellbent. I love the whole 3-part finale. It's a brilliant series, which is where I kind of sit a bit more towards. And so I just think that ever increasing, I think Series 10 maybe was a little bit less of that. I think it was just such a good finale in general that people kind of most people enjoyed that finale. And I think the rest of the series kind of is just maybe a little bit average in comparison. Maybe that's a bit of a too strong a statement to say. But I guess to some extent it depends on how controversial the finale is as to the kind of perception of how good the series is as a whole. Because I guess maybe the less offensive finales, maybe the Series 4 finale, I mean there's still controversial aspects to that, and the Series 5 finale, that is complex, but maybe not quite as, you know, offensive to some people, like, say, the Timeless Children mystery is, and those kind of things. I just think that it can be so significant and substantial in sort of influencing people and what their perceptions and their opinions of a whole series are just on that 1 or 2 episodes at the end of a series.
Doctor, what are you looking at?
The clouds. Still there.
Oh, dear Lord!
There's a Cyberman out there on the fuselage.
In 24 hours, the human race, as you know it, will cease to exist.
Doctor!
It's happening everywhere. All over the world right now.
So I think ultimately kind of I want to come to the point that I think the finales are critically important to Doctor Who nowadays. Maybe that's partially the show's own fault in the way it markets it, the way that it's written previous finales and kind of built the series around leading to a finale in a lot of ways. Some series more than others. I know Series 11 is probably the big kind of, you know, exception to the rule where the finale was terrible because it wasn't a big epic story and there wasn't any conclusion to a narrative, because there wasn't any narrative running through the series really, apart from, I guess, the Ryan Graham relationship, and that was about the only thing that was really concluded in that story. And so I would kind of put that out there as kind of the exception to the general rule that you can compare in series, you know, 5, 6, 7, really any of the series. They have a big arc that's concluded in a big story at the end of it. That's just the format of the show throughout New Who, and I think that's fine. I think that's a good thing, but I think that we shouldn't lose sight of when we're rating, you know, a series. We shouldn't lose sight of the whole series in favour of a finale that you really do or don't like. I think it can lift or push down a series perception, but I think as fans, it's kind of, you know, we can try and avoid doing that where possible, because I think it's better to judge a series as a whole rather than its final episode.
The hybrid will stand in the ruins of Gallifrey and destroy 1 billion hearts to heal its own. Isn't this going a little far? I've barely started.
But I do think in the years to come, assuming that Doctor Who does continue for years and years to come, the finales are only going to increase in importance. I think almost more than that to an extent. For me, I think the importance of a stronger narrative through the series is what's going to become increasingly more important, because the sort of shows that survive as weekly format shows that we can think of are shows like Line of Duty, maybe, which is a show that's so heavily interlinked across multiple seasons almost, but certainly within the season there's, you know, every episode is a cliffhanger leading to the next one. I know it's a very different sort of programme to Doctor Who. I'm not saying that Doctor Who should just necessarily do one 10 or 8 episode story and that should be it. I still think that Monster of the Week and stories like that can really, really work. I just think that the show could benefit from having a more consistent and stronger narrative, something almost having some sort of link between each story that just keeps viewers coming back. And I think that's, again, that's for example where Series 11 really got things wrong in trying to keep that audience, because it didn't give the audience any reason to stay. As much as the episodes weren't great quality, it just didn't give the audience that reason to stick with it and stick around. So I think alongside the increasing importance of finales and really getting those right and really hitting what the audience wants from them, I think it's also so important to create a narrative that runs throughout the series that the audience can engage with and just keeps them watching the show.
Told you before that everything you knew was a lie. Now you get to face the truth.
Whatever you want with me, fine. But save my friends.
Brace yourself.
So there we go, guys. Maybe that's a bit of a ramble. I don't know. I just really have kind of strong feelings about narrative arcs and finales and kind of the structure of a Doctor Who series. I just find that fascinating. I think it's really, really interesting and important, and it's always worth looking at and kind of analysing previous series and how the differences between classic and New Who and just everything around that is something that really interests me, and hopefully some of you guys will find it interesting too. I would love to hear your comments down below. Please do post what your kind of perception of finales are. Do you think that they are as important as I tend to rank them. Do they colour your opinion of a series, or are you kind of able to separate them a little bit from a series in some ways? And also, what are your thoughts on having more tighter narrative arcs and story arcs that run through a series? Do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing for the show? I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about it down in the comments below. But apart from that, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this slightly rambly but hopefully really interesting little video. Please do hit the like button and the subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again for a brand new video very, very soon. Goodbye!